And once again, we want to thank everybody. And ladies and gentlemen, President of the Nassau-Suffolk School Board Association and Bethpage trustee, Mr. Michael Kelly. It's all yours, sir.
Okay, thank you, Bob, and good evening, everyone. As Bob mentioned, I am Michael Kelly, and I'm the president of the Nassau-Suffolk School Board Association. I just want to thank everybody for attending tonight's webinar about the Long Island's changing demographics. I'd also like to thank the Nassau-Suffolk School Boards Association's In-Service Committee for putting this advocacy series together. And I'd like to make sure that you join us for part 3 and 4. The dates which you can obtain from our website. I think we'll probably have a slide at the end with the actual dates. I don't have it handy right now. At this point, I'd also like to thank Mr. Ryan Ruff, the Chief Operating Officer for the Eastern Suffolk BOCES, for putting this information together, and we look forward to his presentation. And at this time, I'd like to turn it back over to the Nassau-Suffolk Board Executive Director, Bob Vecchio. Bob?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kelly, and once again, thank you all for joining us. And we are recording this webinar so that it could be viewed later on by a lot of the folks that registered, but were not able to be here this particular evening. I also want to thank our executive committee at the Nassau-Suffolk School Board Association for spearheading this advocacy series, and the board in-service committee in particular. I also want to thank all of you for taking time out of your busy schedules to take part in the advocacy series that Nassau-Suffolk School Boards has put together. Again, Mr. Kelly alluded to parts 3 and 4. So let's talk about some upcoming events, if you will. Not thank you and good night. Upcoming events. The big one that's coming up after this is January 26th. It's the annual joint conference with the Nassau-Suffolk School Board Association and the Nassau and Suffolk Superintendents Association. And our guest speaker is New York State Comptroller Tom DiNapoli. The importance of that is the governor has until February 1st to release her budget this year. And she should be very close to her budget proposal, if not out prior to that. But we'll have the comptroller give us an economic outlook, kind of a state of the state, if you will, for the economic picture, as well as addressing other issues. He recently issued a poverty report in New York, which I think is pertinent to some of the information we're going to talk about this evening. Part 3 of Know Your Story, Tell Your Story, Sell Your Story is on February 8th, and that's Financial Literacy Beyond the Mandate. And Dr. Sam Gurgis, the business official from Sayville, will be presiding over that presentation, and that will be at Sayville High School. For my Suffolk board trustees that have been looking for an event in Suffolk County. And for our Nassau folks, it's very easy to get to right off of Sunrise Highway. So we hope you join us. That's in person, February 8th. We will be serving a buffet-style dinner and some beverages. So that'll be included. Registration information will be sent at a later date. And then the final part of our series, March 9th, we'll be back at the Heritage Club at Bethpage State Park. For those of us that were there for part 1 with Assemblyman Fred Thiel, will be back in the same location. And that is Marketing Matters. And that's part of the Sell Your Story piece. And we're going to go over strategies to basically sell your story, not just to the elected officials who you'll be advocating for throughout the season, but also your community, and why marketing matters, and who speaks for your brand, which is your school district. The other big event we want to tell you about is an evening with Dr. Betty Roser, Commissioner of the New York State Education Department. Again, that'll be at the Heritage Club at Bethpage State Park on April 24th. We expect a big turnout for that, as this will be one of Dr. Roser's first visits, I believe, to the Nassau-Suffolk School Boards here on Long Island, and I also believe for the superintendents on a joint event as well. So that's April 24th. And then finally, our end of the year annual business dinner and School Board Members Award Recognition Dinner. That's on May 30th, and that is at the Fox Hollow in Woodbury. And we have some exciting news that we'll be announcing in just a few short weeks about recognizing your colleague board members for outstanding work. And also, if you have board members that are retiring from your board this year, we're going to give you an opportunity to recognize them at our annual dinner. So those are some of the remaining upcoming dates that we want to make sure that you're aware of. But again, why does the data matter? And it's part of knowing your story. For those that were with us with Assemblyman Fred Thiel, he talked about knowing your data. But Mr. Ryan Ruff, the Chief Operating Officer for Eastern Suffolk BOCES, they have been compiling a lot of this data for many, many years. And they've been tracking the trends. And there have been some significant changes in our demographics on Long Island, both from demographics and population types, but socioeconomic changes, ELL changes. Even though we've had enrollment drops in most districts on Long Island, the changes and the needs have changed dramatically, which changes how we operate and the resources we need to deliver the high quality education that Long Island is known for. Listen, it was just announced today that Long Island has 10% of the Regeneron semifinalists in the country. 10% of them are from Long Island. So we have an impressive quality of education here on Long Island. And Mr. Ruff is going to go over some of the data that you need to know for the shifting demographics to help us plan for the future and also know your data. Last thing I want to pitch to all of you, if you haven't already, Nassau-Suffolk School Boards has a Facebook group. It's a private group for school board trustees only. And you could follow us on Twitter. And then also, we have an application program, which from an advocacy standpoint, I think is a must. It's called Bill Track 50. You can track legislation on a federal level, a state level. You could also track and follow your elected officials. And you could also track specific bills or just specific language in bills. Like there was a big initiative that went on this past Monday about healthy school meals for all New York students that we got behind together with the Health and Welfare Council on Long Island. You could type in key phrases to search any and all bills that are being proposed or kicked around up in Albany or down in DC so that you could keep track of your advocacy priorities. So to subscribe to this free member service, Bill Track 50, or to join our Facebook group, just email us at info@nssba.org. So we sent out a newsletter earlier today for folks that we have an email address for about Bill Track 50. So we hope you take advantage of that. So with that being said, you've been seeing Mr. Ruff's handsome picture there along with his bio. And me and Ryan share an anniversary date of taking over our positions from two ladies who left an incredible mark on public education and advocacy in particular. But, he's a good friend for all of us. This is not his first rodeo with studying data. Former business official, data and numbers matter to him. And now he is our Chief Operating Officer for Eastern Suffolk BOCES. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to be quiet so that now we will also hear from Mr. Ruff. And if you have any questions during the presentation, go to the Q&A box up at the top of the toolbar, and you can type your question in the Q&A there, and we will monitor those questions during the presentation. And then we'll also have time for a interactive Q&A at the end of Mr. Ruff's presentation. So no pressure, Mr. Ruff, as this is your inaugural presentation of Long Island's changing demographics. And we are his first captive audience. So no pressure. Ryan, it's all yours. And thank you for presenting tonight.
Michael, Bob, Executive Committee, thanks for this opportunity. Really look forward to this. And I think it's a perfect timing for the season we're about to enter related to advocacy work, and lays a really good groundwork and also builds on the information that was shared in part one by Fred Thiel. And during that time, he emphasized knowing your data, and that's what I'm going to be talking about tonight. So the overview for this evening is census demographics, right? We had a big census done. Yep, it was delayed a little bit, but did we get a chance to really take a look at all the amazing information that was provided related to Long Island and New York State? We're going to take a look at and compare it to student demographic information on Long Island, spend a little time talking about foundation aid, and then some planning for the future. First thing that I always like to share and mention is at Eastern Suffolk BOCES, our board is phenomenal at supporting us to do advocacy work and have individuals who support finding good data, finding good advocacy resources. And if you go to our homepage, you'll be able to find some just truly fantastic reports. The Long Island Cost and Outcomes Report, which looks like this, which is through LIA and LIEC, is a phenomenal resource, and that's posted up on our website. And something that was just completed this past Thursday by Dr. Pat McCabe and her team is the delicate face map. So I'll just hold that up. You probably can't see me. I don't know if you can see me. Teams is a little bit foreign to me. But for those of you who are familiar, the face maps on our website as well. If you go to our homepage at esboces.org, you scroll down about halfway, you'll see the tab at the bottom of the slide. You click on advocacy and you'll see all that information right there. And again, I know a lot of you look for that updated face maps, which we'll be sure to make sure that Bob gets some copies of that as well. So let's jump right in. Let's begin. Let's take a look at some of what we learned by looking at the New York State Census. So you'll remember our census got off to a little bit of a rocky start, right? That's right around when COVID happened, about a month earlier from when the official launch was in April. Nonetheless, a lot of the information provided as a result, although it was delayed, was very, very helpful. You can see that New York State's population increased by 4.2%, up to 20.2 million people. This chart provides a comparison from 2010 to 2020, right? They do this once every 10 years, by the largest increases by county. So of no surprise, Kings, Rockland, Queens. A little bit of a surprise to me is the percent increase in Saratoga County. Absolutely beautiful part of the state, but nonetheless, you typically see more of a growth in the metropolitan area near New York City. Long Island increased by 3%. And sure, it will be interesting to see the next result to see if that was impacted with some folks leaving Long Island. So Nassau-Suffolk, Nassau saw a larger increase of 4.2 and Suffolk around 2.2, but overall picking up 88,000 people over a 10-year course of time. That is very different than upstate, where you had a lot of rural counties who lost quite a few. Just one final note, prior to the 2020 census, it was projected that New York State was going to lose 2 congressional seats, but they were surprised to only lose 1 congressional seat in the end. So that was good news for New York State. The difference, so this is the importance of the census, and I know the Health and Welfare Council was instrumental in making sure as many people were captured, especially in Long Island region, but we lost that last seat by only 89 people being missed in the count across the state, which I always find very, very interesting, right? It's, each vote counts, every person counts as well. Taking a look at the race and ethnicity change from 10 to 20. So again, New York State picked up around 823,000 people. We can see the changes in non-Hispanic white. We see decreases of 6% in the state and a larger percentage of 10% on Long Island. We look at non-Hispanic Black population. Although it decreased in New York State, there was an increase on Long Island, about 4.5%. The Asian population itself saw the largest percentage increases of 50% on Long Island, and the largest number increases was with the Hispanic population. So in the state, almost 500,000 or over 500,000 people, and on Long Island, 147,000 people. So we think about that as how our state is changing over a 10-year period of time, how Long Island is changing, and that is informative for the work that we do. Now what we want to take a look at is, what does this mean inside of our schools? So what are we seeing with enrollment shifts, enrollment changes? And this slide here, although it's not the same period of time of 2010 to 2020, it does provide a 10-year period. Our data is more up to date. We get this information annually, where the census, of course, is done once every 10 years. So it's a little bit lagged. But what we're seeing in our schools is a decrease in Suffolk County, 11% change over a 10-year period of time between 2012-13 school year to 2021-22 school year, and 5% in Nassau County. So Long Island as a whole lost about 8 of the student population overall. So the question would be, why is this? Well, although the population is increasing in New York State, we are seeing people of family age frequently moving, especially off from Long Island, and those are frequently the ones who are having children and sending their children to our schools. So this doesn't mean every single school on Long Island lost students, but overall we are seeing a decline in enrollment for us as we continue into the future. This chart provides a similar breakdown as when we looked at our census data. The top chart is 12-13 student racial ethnic demographics. The middle chart is 10 years later. So if you look over here to Hispanic in Long Island, it was around 21%. And last year that increased to 31.8%. Opposite, the white population on Long Island went from 60% to 46%. So we're seeing that shift in our schools. Remember, this is school enrollment data, it indicates the changes that we are seeing and align with what we saw in the census data as well. The bottom chart here provides trend information comparing these top two charts. But what's important is that we see how the racial and ethnic makeup of our schools are changing over time. So some key information for us that we track in our reports is taking a look at economically disadvantaged students. And a really important factor for us to be aware of as we lead our schools and we make decisions related to policy and allocations and budget are what are the students in our buildings, who on Long Island and in the state are we educating every day in our public schools. And this to me is a very alarming fact that a third, approximately 34% of the students in Long Island schools are economically disadvantaged. So what does that mean? What does that term mean? We know what it means, but how is it defined by the state education department? So these are students whose families participate in an economic assistance program. Some examples of that would be free and reduced lunch or Social Security insurance, temporary assistance for the needy families, and safety net assistance programs. So we know when we have economically disadvantaged students, they require additional resources within our schools and supports. Similarly with homeless students. So this is a chart for the top homeless districts other than homeless students other than New York City and New York State. And you will see on our chart, we have five districts on Long Island, with Hempstead being the first in terms of total number. So homeless students are students who lack a fixed and regular nighttime residence, students who may be living in another home due to an economic hardship, but these are students that are in our schools, in our school buildings, require resources from our school systems that we provide. According to the state education department, about 1% of the students on Long Island, about 4,425 students, experience homelessness. Same percentage in the rest of the state, excluding New York City, that have that. So those are needs that we meet for these students, and we're happy to do so. Shifting to Long Island and in conversation with what we're seeing in trends, and we're set up very in a very interesting position, because we often have the federal government placing unaccompanied minors in Suffolk County and Nassau County. They come to our schools, and we provide the resources, of course, to these students. In Suffolk County, in terms of an area, last year we were the 6th largest area in the country to have unaccompanied minors, which are often ELL students or multilingual learners. So the information and the state education department still labels as ELL and classifies them in this area, but you'll also more commonly hear multilingual learners as well. So in the Brentwood School District of approximately 18,000 students, we see about a third of their students are ELL. That is the largest public school in New York State with the largest number of ELL students. Again, you see a common theme when we have students with additional needs. We require in public education additional resources to support these students to make sure that they are given the best opportunities to succeed, and that is what we do. This is a list of districts on Long Island that have more than 20% of their student enrollment with students classified as ELL. And this is a change over the 10-year period of time for ELL students. So you can see a trend in Suffolk County of a 58% increase, a lesser increase in Nassau, but overall still dramatically outpacing the rest of the state at 29% increase overall. Additional students that we always take a look at as well in terms of resources is students with disabilities. So these are students, as we all know, that have the Committee of Special Education has identified as students in need of an individualized. Did I just lose something here?
Looks good.
So I still see everything, Ryan.
you
Maybe
do?
it's just on your end. I'm sorry.
I'm still good.
Yep. We're still seeing Long Island shifting demographics. Slide.
Okay, give me 1 second. I'm missing. Let me go back here.
Now,
All right. Are we back in action with?
We're back in action.
back in
Okay.
action. Yep, okay.
So again, this is students with disabilities and the change during that same 10-year period of time. And I find this very interesting, right? Because remember, we have declining enrollments, but increased enrollments with students with disabilities. Again, this may be a child that only requires speech, a group session of speech 1 day a week, or maybe a minor testing modification, or it could be a child with severe needs that requires private placement or a public school or a BOCES school placement. But what's interesting is the resources required to support when we have more students that require individualized education plan. And we're more than happy, obviously, to provide those resources. What I find really interesting on this slide is the difference between the rest of the state. So they're seeing about a 1% increase, so the increased trend is there. But on Long Island, we far outpaced that at about an 8% increase. So just something for our elected officials to know about when it comes to resources. So as I'm sure most of you know, combined wealth ratio is a measurement that is a statewide factor using two different factors. It's very simple. It takes a look at the property wealth per pupil in a school district, and it takes a look at the income wealth per pupil in a school district. And it comes up with a statewide average of 1.0. If a school district has a combined wealth ratio greater than 1.0, that means it's greater in the average wealth compared to the entire state. And if it's lower than 1.0, that just means it's less than the average wealth. And what we always like to take a look here, because there's these perceptions from across the state that Long Island, all of Long Island is wealthy. But this is a chart that clearly shows that that is simply not the case. In Suffolk County, 60% of our students attend schools with a below than 1.0 average wealth. And that's always alarming to me, right? Because you think of some North Shore districts or other areas that have very high wealth and high property wealth, and out east and in the Hamptons. But those school districts have only a small number of students attending them. We have other school districts with a large number of students, and they're below the average wealth.
Yeah, I heard it described, Ryan, as Long Island has pockets of wealth as opposed to pockets of poverty. And almost every community, whether you're a high needs or low needs district, there are socioeconomically challenged students in almost every school district, which is an important point we're trying to make here with the changing demographics as well.
This chart provides all school districts with an enrollment greater than 1,000 students. These are the highest to lowest wealthiest districts on Long Island. What that 12 means in Southampton is simply that they have 12 times the average wealth of 1.0. That makes a lot of sense when you look at the types of homes that are built in that district, and you move down the list and you can see that these are school districts that we also include the enrollment change, all with the exception of Great Neck, have declining enrollments. And in Great Neck, or excuse me, in Mattituck, over a 10-year period of time, they've almost lost a quarter of their students. So this is the wealthiest, and we transition to the least wealthiest districts. So Wyandanch is at about a quarter of the average, so they're at 0.26%. And they have just the opposite. They're having a sizable increase in enrollment. So this isn't consistent across the board with all increasing enrollment or all decreasing, but I would point out that for the most part, the increases are much greater than the decreased enrollment. So you're seeing to kind of just pause for a second, you're seeing an increase in the census going up 4.2% in the state. You're seeing enrollment go down. You're seeing wealthier districts lose students. You're seeing the least wealthy districts in many cases gaining students. And you could think of the pressures that it puts on their school systems. So with that, we take a look at our largest funding source for public education and other than property taxes, and the impact that we have on foundationing. So many of you, I don't want to scare you with this slide, so let me just preface it before you start having agita with this one. But many of you have heard us say foundation aid, foundation aid, foundation aid, or the foundation aid formula. What's the formula? Well, believe it or not, there is a foundation aid formula, and this is the foundation aid formula. So not that anybody's going to be able to look at this and follow it, but I do think there are some key things for us to actually look at here. So if you look at the green coloring, it talks about pupil data. So if you look up here, we have enrollment index data. We have students with disability data. Down here, we have English language learners. We have 2,000, think of how old that is, census poverty data with student enrollment. Here's your free and reduced lunch at the bottom in the green here. And sparsity counts is something applied to how many students per square mile. So there is a formula. As the data is updated and adjusted, these factors get updated and adjusted as well. In the red, these are a lot of the aid ratio factors that we work with. But over here, you'll hear things about consumer price index. You'll hear about regional cost index. You've heard about that, I'm sure, for years and years and years. Or if you're new to this, that's a factor that's applied to provide additional support within the foundation aid formula. So, and you can see here some of the income wealth factors. So I know this chart looks absolutely crazy, and it's not meant to intimidate anybody, but I do like to share it because you've heard for years and years and years, many of you, the foundation aid formula, and I just wanted to share where it is and a chart for references when we talk about some of the changes to the foundation aid formula.
It reminds me of the game show Press Your Luck with the whammies, right? So.
Yeah, hit the button. So this is just a chart because we know that we're in year 2 of fully funding foundation aid. So Governor Hochul, in response to the CFE case, responded, and over a 3-year period of time, we're looking to fund this. What this chart shows is that going back to 07, 08, that the low and low mid wealth districts, paid the majority of the shortfalls in foundation aid that was owed. Some points, important points for next year is the fully funding of foundation aid for 23-24. This is estimated to be about $2.6 billion. In a normal year of the 3 years of fully funding foundation aid, it was to be 1.5, 1.5, and 1.5 billion. That 3 times is fully going to fund it. So you ask yourself, well, if 1.5 was what was left to fund foundation aid, why is the number so much greater? And that's because within the foundation aid formula is CPI, which is the same measure that's in our tax cap formula as well, except there's no 2% cap. So the CPI embedded in the foundation aid formula, which is running around 8%, is going to drive on an extra about $1.5 billion into the formula. What adjusted slightly is that New York City and some of the other districts are losing some enrollment. So some of those enrollment losses are pulling that total back to 2.6 billion. So that's really good news. That's going to be very helpful to many districts as they battle inflation, but it's always the devil's in the details in terms of how the numbers work out individually for each district. The other focal point for 23-24 is districts currently on hold harmless, meaning they're receiving all of the foundation aid, or in some cases, if the formula was to run, more foundation aid that they should be receive what's referred to as the due minimum. So for past years, Governor Hochul has made that due minimum a 3% increase, meaning whether you're scheduled for an increase in foundation aid, we're going to give you a 3% increase on the minimum to help you cover your expenses. So foundation aid formula reviews moving forward, right? So we're taking a look at demographics, we're taking a look at how those change, and then we're really looking for dollars to make sure that we can support this shifting demographic. What can we do? We can review and adjust the weighings for high need students embedded in that formula that I shared with you. We can improve data collection for measuring student poverty. If you remember, I pointed out that number dates back to 2020. We can update the regional cost index numbers. So we know that over the past few decades, that needs to be adjusted as expenses have adjusted and shifted across the state, and review the impact of student-based district wealth factors. So another, just updating the factors within foundation aid would have it more relevant and drive dollars to the neediest places. So let's think about planning for the future. That's what we're really good at, right? That's the role of our boards and our central offices and the administrative team to make sure we have high quality education programs. So this is a chart that, sorry, I just lost it. This is a chart that we are thinking about in business offices and central offices right now, in some cases with the board. So I want to take a budget, a hypothetical budget in the current year, in the 22-23 year, of $100 million. So that's just to use round numbers so we can wrap our head around this. And I want to try to just take you through what school districts are faced with probably this year, if not this year, next year, the year after, when they put their budgets together. So as we know, right, budgets are 2 parts. We have the revenue side of our budget. We have the expenditure side of our budget. And I'm going to show you when we put together a budget in a tax cap era, what that would look like. So in this hypothetical $100 million budget, I'm going to make a couple of assumptions. And the first assumption I'm going to make is 70% of this hypothetical school district's revenues come from property taxes and 30% from state aid and other. Most Long Island districts get less than 30% in state aid, but for this situation, we're going to make that assumption. And because we have that tax cap, we're going to assume that the increase is 2% for property taxes, and we're going to assume the other revenue is locked in at only a 3% increase. So what you're seeing overall as this district moves from 22-23 into 23-24, that their total revenues that they can raise go up by 2.3%. Now, if I go over to the expenditure side of the budget and I just look at 5 areas: salary, health insurance, transportation, utilities, supplies, and equipment, and I take a look at what those increases are going to be, you'll see that it's very hard for the revenues to keep pace with some of the expenses that we're looking at. So just real quick, using that same analysis, 70% of a typical school district budget is pure salary. So it's not benefits, just salary. We're in a labor-intense business. We have people that deliver the instruction and the related support. So if 70% of my budget goes up, I'm going to guess 3%. So even if you have contracts negotiated at 2%, often there's changes in longevity or changes in step. But I think a pretty conservative estimate is 3%. This would be, I would need $72.1 million to support that. And you could argue that this number may be 5 or 6%, right? Health insurance, the average budget, and again, it could be 7%, it could be 9%, but in most cases, it's right around the 8% of the budget is just health insurance, right? We're not talking pension costs or anything else. But we just got staggering news that the Nice Ship plan, which the majority of Long Island districts are in, went up by 15% for the family plan, and I think even closer to 20% for retiree costs. So that'd be another $9.2 million. Transportation, so transportation, again, around 6% of the typical budget. If you do less than that, that's great, but in some cases it may be more depending on your contract. And if you do it in-house, you can probably do better than a 10% increase, or I should say maybe you can do better than a 10% increase. Who knows with the requirement on shifting to electric buses. But we know when we talk to some of our transportation contract providers, I heard numbers as high as 30% earlier today. But for the sake of this analysis, I'm going to say it's a 10% increase. Utilities is the other area that we're seeing big increases in. Luckily, it's a much smaller part of the budget. That's our electric, that's our fuel heating or our natural gas to heat the buildings. Maybe you have a major solar project and you're able to control that increase better. But we know what has happened with the pricing, and that's been at least a 15% increase. Lastly, we got supplies and equipment, new computers, maybe a new vehicle for the maintenance department. We have supplies for the students, textbooks, materials, office materials, generally a very small portion of your budget. But we know that inflation, this is getting hit. Paper costs in some cases are up 30 and 40%. But inflation is hovering between 8 and 9%. So if I just take a look at the expense side of my budget, 87.5% of my budget, if I take the remainder and I don't even say that any of those costs went up, which probably is not going to be the case, right? We know it's not the case because I don't have our pension increases in there. I don't have other increases in here. Maybe a new program to think about. But if I just keep that flat, you can see that the overall increase in the 23-24 budget's $104,305,000 or a 4.3% increase. I just want to share this slide because you can see there's a difference of over $2 million. And the real question moving forward for our school districts on Long Island is how are we going to make up that difference? If these are going to be the cost drivers that we have right now and the percent increases that we see moving into the future, how do we close that gap? And in the short term, maybe it is that we have some funds in unassigned fund balance, or we have some funds in reserves, or we have maybe we're fortunate where we're a district who's getting more than just a 3% increase in state aid. But if you fall into one of the 200 school districts in New York State that only get the due minimum, which is 3%, and you don't want to exceed the property tax cap, which nobody wants to do that, you're going to have a problem in the very near future. So it's just thinking into the future. I wanted to share that, and this is what a lot of business offices and superintendents are looking at right now. So in conclusion, what can we do? What do we need to do to serve our collective communities? And that's the common theme here. It's taking the data, understanding the students in the communities that we serve, and collaborating with our elected officials to make sure that we partner with them and they understand our needs and the things that are going to help us the most. So it's recognizing the changing needs and the opportunities that these changes provide to us to create and have beautiful communities moving into the future. Sustainable funding that supports the future of Long Island. So that's what the theme is, and that's what we're thinking about here. And how do we reshape the future? So it's understand the communities and students that we serve. Our goals in every single school is to continue to provide high quality, well-rounded education programs. I could think of no better point than the one that Bob made at the beginning, that we have 10% of the nation's Regeneron students. That's absolutely incredible. And create multi-year financial plans that align with our student demographics so that we're making sure that the dollars are being driven to the students with the needs that we see. And with that, I thank you for the opportunity to provide an overview on the demographics of Long Island, some of the impacts that we see, and how foundation aid can be utilized and adjusted forward so that we can align our collective interests to meet our students.
And Ryan, I want to thank you because you have did the goal that I set out for, was 40 minutes or less, and you did a great job with that. So thank you for that. The question I have for you before we open up questions to anybody that's been listening in, and you gave us a lot of data. Again, this PowerPoint is going to be available on the Eastern Suffolk BOCES website. It's also going to be available on the Nassau-Suffolk School Board website. And Ryan touched on it very quickly early on. There's another report that is on both websites called the Cost and Outcomes Report. That was put together by the Long Island Education Coalition in conjunction with the Long Island Association, the largest business association on Long Island. This is a critical read for everybody to become familiar with because it'll help you understand not just the cost, but in relation to outcomes. It'll talk and break down regionalized cost differences, how much it costs to do business and education on Long Island compared to other parts of the state, how much a dollar buys you on Long Island compared to upstate New York, which is critically important. But Ryan, my question for you is, if board members that are listening in tonight say, I want to go back now, and I want to go to my business official and say, okay, where is our specific data for our changing student demographic needs? Who are they going to? Is this data that is collected centrally, like out by Eastern Suffolk BOCES, that could be readily available? We don't want to inundate business officials all of a sudden with trying to get specific data to plan for the future, but it is important data to get and understand in each individual community, because there's overall shifts across Long Island, and then there's nuanced shifts within particular communities. What's your advice for board members as far as action steps from tonight forward?
So it's a great segue. On January 21st, the Suffolk County School Superintendents Association will be hosting a advocacy day for Suffolk school board. So I apologize if you're in Nassau, but we'll make sure we get the resources. And we are going to focus on just that very thing. So there is a spreadsheet that provides demographic information that can be completed by any school district. We're taking it one step further this year, and Dr. Pat McCabe and her team are creating a kind of an instruction manual or a guide of where you get every single one of these pieces of data. It's all openly available resources. So it's state aid, state education department websites. It could be a Questar state aid website. Much of the data is in the BEDS data that school districts already have. So we spend a lot of time in schools getting data together. And I think it makes a lot of sense for us to just pause when we can to look at the trends in that data and make decisions based on some of that. So we will make sure that both of those resources, the data collection tool, as well as the instruction guide, is up on the advocacy portion of our website, so that everybody on Long Island has access to that and they can share it. And if there's any board members out there that want to talk to their business official, whether it's in Nassau County or Suffolk, just have them give me a call and we'll make sure that they get it even sooner.
Great. Thank you for that. And then the last thing that I would want to touch on too is we have a lot of new elected officials at the state level in particular, and also at the congressional level. So a lot of this data and information and impact of this information is going to be very new to them. So we actually have homework to do to educate the folks that are representing us. What are some of the key things that we want to make sure that they, you're doing the elevator pitch and you want them to remember 3 key factors. What are the 3 key factors for Long Island schools in general that you want them to take up to Albany?
Yeah, I think absolutely the first is a show of gratitude. I think we lead each of these conversations with a big thank you, even though maybe they weren't at the office at the time. I think opening it up with a sign of appreciation is important for our elected officials. They delivered big dollars, especially during COVID, and that's something that was key for us to keep our operation moving forward. After that, I would take a look at some of the foundation aid adjustments that we think make a lot of sense, right? They're fully funding foundation aid. We're incredibly appreciative for that. Let's move our thank yous to an ask and make some of these adjustments and update some of these factors. We think that would be important as well with that. And then lastly, I think it's important for elected officials to know who their superintendents are, so that they can feel comfortable to reach out when issues cross their desk related to public education and be able to get a good inside look at any issue that's facing them, right? We know things come up where maybe they shouldn't have gotten involved, such as APPR and other things like that. Let's not make mistakes like we've done in the past, and let's show that support to our elected officials so that we can educate them each time. So it's exchanging cell phone numbers, it's providing a high level of appreciation, it's taking a look at some of that data changes that we have to see as well.
Great. And Ryan, if you could stop sharing, this way we bring up the rest of the folks across the grid here. If you have a question for Ryan or us, just ask that you raise your hand or post a question in the chat or the Q&A. And Ryan is here to lend his expertise to the burning question on your mind based on everything he just gave you. So, anybody? Ms. Romano, just unmute yourself. I may regret saying that.
As you were making the presentation, I was noting that the increases in non-English speaking students is a factor that is growing in number and percentage. Do we have any sense regionally or locally about how to measure the cost of providing those services to those students, to give legislators a perspective of the number, for example, in our district that is allocated or that needs to be allocated because of things like Part 154?
Yeah, we have collected that data in our budget impact survey information. That's this report here that we have also readily available. So that information we have seen major increased costs or reallocations of support to students moving forward. What we think is really important in this area, from my perspective, is this kind of goes beyond a New York State issue, although we are appreciative that they recognize this within the foundation aid formula. And I made mention of it before, but Suffolk County is ranked 6th in the entire nation, and Nassau County 13th in the entire nation, with the federal government placing unaccompanied minors. And that's not to say that unaccompanied minors are automatically multilingual learners, but it is often the case, probably the case 99% of the time. And that's a good thing, right? We cherish the ability for us to provide the rich educational programs to all of their students, including these students. But there are additional costs associated with making this happen. And it would be fantastic if there was a recognition of that at the federal level, whether it goes federal to the local districts or federal to the state. I think that would be make a heck of a lot of sense for us on a larger scale. So maybe when we travel to Washington, D.C., that's something for us to think about. And we can get you some of that data so that often, right, it always supports our advocacy points when we have numbers behind it.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Romano. Anybody else? All right. I'm not seeing anything show up in the chat or hands raised or folks unmuting. And our goal was to try to keep this tightly packed and condensed and give you a lot of information to chew on, but do it 60 minutes or less so that we hold your attention. We want to thank you once again for joining us. We hope that the data presented and the way it was presented gives you some food for thought about your advocacy and things to look at in your district to know your story to help be able to tell it and sell it. Once again, join us for part 3, which is going to be on February 8th at Sayville High School. And Dr. Sam Gurgis will do a little deeper dive into budgeting and fund accounting and use of reserves, a little bit fiscal literacy 101 beyond the mandate that the state association does so well, and maybe do a little deeper dive into the examples that Ryan touched on. So a nice little segue at the end there, Mr. Ruff. We appreciate that. And again, our 4th and final part will be Marketing Matters and how to sell your story, and that'll be back at the Heritage Club. So pay attention to our website, join our Facebook group, sign up for Bill Track 50. That's a very powerful tool to have in your advocacy toolbox to be able to track legislation and pertinent issues and your new legislators too. You have a lot of folks, they may be reelected, but representing new areas. So you're going to want to get to know them if you haven't had the chance to get to know them. And we're going to try to take a proactive role with setting up in-district meetings with our reelected and newly elected officials as well, so that we can form the partnership that is necessary, a collaborative working relationship with our officials so that they understand what we need, and then we are a resource for them when they need it, when legislation is crossing their desk, because it is a partnership and it's not just a couple times a year, it's a year-round relationship building process, and we're going to assist that here at Nassau-Suffolk. So we appreciate your time, energy, and attention tonight. Happy New Year, everybody. And Ms. Bergstrom, you wanted to say something?
Well, when they leave, only because it's about last night's meeting, so they don't have to sit and.
Oh, okay. No, you definitely
you just don't leave. The rest of
I'm
them.
not going anywhere.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thanks, Ryan. She found a
Great night,
misplaced
everybody.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you.
Ryan, thank you. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Have a good
Ryan.
day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.
Everyone.